Why do some organizations move smoothly while others get stuck in constant friction? The difference often lies in how work flows through your team, and most leaders are missing a crucial insight about this. Hi, I'm Terrance Bryant, founder of Enovara. When organizations come to us struggling with efficiency, they often think they need new tools or more people. But through our work, we've discovered that understanding workflows, really understanding them, changes everything. Today, we're diving deep into workflows, but not in the way you might expect. We'll explore what workflows really are beyond the buzzword, how to spot workflow problems before they create chaos, practical ways to improve your existing workflows, and lastly, how to measure if your workflows are really working. I'll share real examples from our client work and even how understanding workflows transforms something as simple as my family's dinner routine from stressful to smooth. Let's start with what a workflow actually is. At its core, a workflow is simply how work moves through your organization, the series of steps, handoffs, and decisions that gets things done. Let me share a simple example with my own family. Every evening, we have what seems like a basic process: make dinner, eat together, and clean up. But within that process, there's a workflow involving three people with different preferences and needs, as well as personalities. For example, I love cooking, but dare I say I hate dishes. My wife, on the other hand, finds dishwashing relaxing, but she can spend all night doing it. Our son wants to help, but he's more eager to get to family time and games. Just like in business, this workflow has clear inputs, groceries and time, processes, cooking and cleaning, and outputs, a clean kitchen and family time. But when we weren't thinking about this as a workflow, we had friction. There were too many dishes piling up and cleaning was taking too long, and we had inevitably less time together in the evening for fun stuff. Once we stepped back and looked at the process as a workflow, we adjusted. We shifted when we cleaned and how we handed things off, and made sure each step made sense for the people involved. The result? Less stress, smoother evening, and more time doing what mattered most. At Enovara, we see the same pattern with our clients. They have talented teams and good intentions, but work gets stuck, tasks pile up, and people get frustrated. Why? Because they're focusing on individual tasks rather than the flow of work. A well-designed workflow isn't about getting things done. It's about understanding how work moves between people, considering everyone's strengths and constraints, and creating a system that works for the whole team. Let's talk about how this plays out in business. I'll share a story with you about a marketing agency we worked with. This agency was full of talented people, but their campaign process was slowing them down. When they came to us, projects were taking 45 days on average to complete. Clients were frustrated and the team was overwhelmed. It wasn't because of a lack of effort. It was actually a workflow that wasn't working for them. At first, they came to us to add new automation and even explore AI to speed up their processes. But before we went down that rabbit hole, we had to take a step back. Because here's the thing, automation and AI don't fix a broken workflow. They just automate the inefficiencies. So instead of layering technology onto unstable foundation, we first focused on making sure that the workflow itself was stronger. Let's look at the process. The creative team designed assets and sent them to account managers. The account managers gathered client feedback and sent them out for revisions. This cycle repeated multiple times before the digital team even got involved. By the time the digital team saw the project, there were technical issues that forced even more redesigns. Meanwhile, the client feedback trickled in at random, extending the timeline as we've seen many a time with scope creep. It seemed like a logical process, but it was full of hidden bottlenecks. Account managers were overloaded, the creative team was working without all the details, and the digital team was brought in too late to prevent rework. To turn things around, we made 4 key changes. Number 1, we started with clarity. All teams met up front to align on project goals and requirements. Number 2, we planned ahead. The digital team provided technical input before design work began. 3. Structured feedback. Clients reviewed work at set checkpoints, reducing back and forth. 4th, clear handoffs. Each team knew exactly when and how to pass work along. What was the result? Well, now projects took 22 days instead of 45. Revision cycles dropped by 60%. Clients were happier because expectations were clear from the start, and the team felt less stressed and more in control. The agency could now take on more work without hiring more staff. Then and only then were we able to talk about AI. Now, instead of trying to force technology into a broken process, they had a solid foundation to build on. This is what workflow transformation is about. It's not about speed. It's about creating clarity, reducing friction, and unlocking more of what's possible. When we build workflows that support the people behind them, everybody wins: the team, the business, and the clients they serve. Every business has workflows, but who actually owns them? If no one is responsible, tasks pile up, bottlenecks form, and teams get frustrated. A workflow without ownership is just a series of disorganized tasks. Keep that in mind. Let's go back to my family's evening routine. Making dinner, remember, eating together, and cleaning up is the core of what we do every evening. At first, we thought we had a process, but the problem wasn't effort. It was a lack of clear ownership. For example, I love cooking, but I wasn't thinking about efficiency. I was just cooking with reckless abandon, using way more dishes than necessary. My wife, remember, enjoys washing dishes, but because of my habits, she was stuck cleaning up way more than she needed, which kept her in her comfort zone, but made the whole process take a longer time. Our son wanted to help, but without a clear role, he ended up being in the way instead of contributing meaningfully. The problem is no one truly owned the workflow. We were all just reacting. There was no structure, no foresight, and no defined handoffs. Once we stepped back and assigned clear roles, everything changed. I owned the cooking process. I had to adjust, thinking ahead and reducing unnecessary dish use. My wife owned the cleanup process, but now she could start earlier with help from our son. Our son now had a defined role, gathering ingredients and tools before I started, making everything move faster. Instead of just working hard, we were working together within a structured system. At the end, cooking was more efficient because I had everything I needed up front. Cleanup was faster and less overwhelming because my wife wasn't waiting until the end. Our son, who was now meaningfully involved, rather than just trying to get help without direction, enjoyed family time a lot sooner than before. We had less friction, less wasted effort, and more time again for what actually mattered. It's the same in any business. A workflow can exist, but if no one owns it, inefficiencies stack up. It's not about assigning tasks. It's about creating clarity at every stage. When no one is accountable for the overall flow of work, gaps form and teams end up working in silos. At the marketing agency, once we defined ownership, something interesting happened. Momentum increased. It wasn't just about reducing revisions or avoiding miscommunication. People began anticipating roadblocks before they even happened. Collaboration became proactive, not reactive. Our account managers shifted from gatekeepers to facilitators. Instead of managing approvals in isolation, they ensured the creative and digital teams had what they needed up front, reducing friction later on. The creative team started thinking beyond design. They aligned their work with the technical requirements early, eliminating rework caused by overlooked constraints. The digital team also gained a strategic role. By contributing from the start, they prevented last-minute changes and created efficiencies across all projects. With these shifts, the agency wasn't just meeting deadlines, they were gaining scalability. Suddenly, they could take on more projects with the same team without burnout or bottlenecks. Well, what's the takeaway? Workflows don't just need owners. They need people who understand their impact. When roles are clearly defined and teams work collaboratively, work stops feeling like a series of disconnected steps. and starts moving as a unified process. Just like in my family's kitchen, assigning ownership transforms any workflow, reducing wasted effort, improving collaboration, and freeing up time for what truly matters. Well, when do you know that your workflow isn't working? Well, you know that feeling that you feel sometimes when something's just off? Let me take you back to my family's kitchen for a moment. We knew something wasn't working with our dinner routine when we started having more takeout nights than home-cooked meals. It wasn't because we didn't want to cook. We were just exhausted by the process. Dishes were piling up and we were eating later and later, and family time was shrinking. These were all signs that our workflow needed help, even though we couldn't quite put our finger on why. The same signals show up in business, and they're often just as subtle. Remember that marketing agency? Before they streamlined their campaign process, they were seeing all the classic signs of workflow in trouble. Projects that used to take 30 days were stretching to 45. Team members were staying late, but somehow falling further behind. And the most telling sign, they were hearing the same feedback in every client meeting. Why is this taking so long? But here's what's fascinating. In both cases, everyone was working harder than ever. That's one of the biggest misconceptions about workflow problems. They often look like effort problems. When your team is putting in extra hours, taking fewer breaks, and still falling behind, that's not a people problem. That's a workflow crying out for help. Let me share what to watch for. In my kitchen, I noticed 3 clear signs: constant interruptions as we search for ingredients, a sink perpetually full of dishes, and family members asking, "What can I do to help?" but never quite finding their role. The same patterns show up in business, just in different forms. Take our marketing agency client. Their creative team was constantly getting interrupted with urgent revision requests. The account managers' inboxes were overflowing with client feedback that needed to be organized and distributed. And their digital team kept asking how they could help earlier in the process, but no one quite knew where to plug them in. The good news: these signs of workflow and trouble are actually opportunities in disguise. Just like we transformed our evening routine by paying attention to these signals, the marketing agency used their challenges as a roadmap for improvement. They didn't need to work harder, they needed to work differently. This is why it's so important to pay attention to these warning signs in your own organization. Are your team members constantly asking for status updates? That's a workflow issue. Find yourself repeating the same information in different meetings? That's a workflow opportunity. Hearing, I didn't know I was supposed to handle that more often than you'd like? You guessed it, your workflow is telling you something. Remember, a struggling workflow isn't a sign of failure. It's an invitation to improve. Just like my family's dinner routine, the solution often isn't adding more effort or resources. It's about seeing the system for what it is and being willing to make changes, even when everything seems to be working fine. In the next section, I'll show you exactly how to make those changes without disrupting your entire operation. Because the goal isn't to flip everything upside down, it's to create positive change that sticks. Well, how do we make them stick? Now that we've identified when a workflow needs help, let's talk about how to actually make these changes without turning everything upside down. Because let's be honest, the phrase, "we're changing our workflow," can strike fear into even the most adaptable teams. Remember our family dinner situation? We didn't completely revolutionize our evening routine overnight. Instead, we started with one simple change. I began asking my son to gather ingredients before I started cooking. It was a small step, but it made an immediate difference. He felt more involved. I stopped interrupting my cooking to search for things, and my wife could start clean up earlier because there was less chaos in the kitchen. This brings me to one of my most important principles of workflow improvement. Start small, but start with something that creates visible wins. Think about it like clearing a path to a messy room. You don't need to organize everything at once. You just need to make it easier to walk from one side to the other. Let's look at how this played out with our marketing agency. Remember, they were struggling with a 45-day campaign process that was frustrating everyone. The first instinct was to completely overhaul everything at once. But instead, we helped them identify one critical change that would make everything else easier. getting the digital team involved at the beginning of the projects instead of at the end. This single change had a ripple effect. The creative team started getting technical input before finalized designs. Account managers could give clients more accurate timelines, and the digital team stopped being the bearers of bad news with technical limitations, which forced late-stage revision. Here's the key. They didn't change it all at once. They didn't implement new software. They didn't reorganize teams or rewrite the procedures in one go. They started with one meaningful change and let their team adjust to it. Think about it like this. If you're teaching someone to cook, you don't start by having them prepare a 5-course meal. You begin with something simple. Let them build confidence and gradually add more complexity. It's the same thing with workflow changes. Once that first change becomes comfortable, you can start looking at the next opportunity. For our marketing agency, the next step was creating structured feedback checkpoints with clients. Again, not a complete overhaul, just another focused improvement that built on the previous success. This approach does something powerful. It turns workflow optimization from a dreaded big project into a series of achievable improvements. Just like in my kitchen, where we gradually refined our process until everything flowed naturally, your team can adapt and improve without feeling overwhelmed. Here's a practical way to think about it. Look for the handoff points in your workflow, those moments where work moves from one person or team to another. These are often the best places to start making improvements because they can affect everyone involved but don't require everyone to change their entire process all at once. In our family dinner example, the handoff of ingredients from my son to me and the transition from cooking to cleanup were our key improvement points. In the marketing agency, it was the handoff of project requirements from account managers to creative team, and the sharing of technical requirements to the digital team. The goal isn't to create a perfect workflow overnight. It's to make steady improvements that your team can absorb and embrace. Because at the end of the day, a workflow is only as good as the people who use it. And when people see positive results from small changes, they become more open to bigger ones. In our next section, we'll talk about how to know if these changes are actually making a difference. Because feeling better about your workflow is important, but measuring its impact is crucial. As we wrap up today's discussion, remember that the goal of workflow improvement isn't perfection, it's progress. Whether you're coordinating family dinner or managing complex business projects, the signs of success are often found in the small moments of "this feels better" just as much as the big metrics of time and money saved. When you focus on measuring what truly matters to the people involved, you'll find that the numbers follow the human success stories. When you're making workflow changes, there's always that moment where you ask yourself, is this actually making a difference? It's a great question, and today I want to show you how to answer it without getting lost in a sea of spreadsheets and statistics. Let's go back to our family kitchen for a moment. How did we know our new dinner routine was working? Well, we didn't break out our stopwatches or create elaborate charts. Instead, we noticed 3 simple but powerful changes. We were sitting down to eat earlier, the kitchen cleanup stopped feeling like a chore, and this was the big one, our evenings transformed with longer family conversations, more laughter at the dinner table, and a noticeably happier family spending quality time together. These were our real-world measures of success. This brings me to an important truth about measuring workflows. The best metrics are the ones that actually matter to the people doing the work. In our kitchen, we cared about our family time and reduced stress, not save seconds per dish washed. Now, let's look at how this plays out in business. Our marketing agency, yes, they cut their campaigns from 45 days to 22 days. That's a number worth celebrating, but the real measure of success went deeper. It wasn't just about time. Their account managers were no longer sending apologetic emails to clients about delays. Their creative team stopped dreading revision meetings because they had clear directions from the start. And the digital team, they went from being the technical roadblock to becoming trusted advisors on projects. These were the human indicators that the workflow was improving. Here's what's fascinating. When you get the human element right, the numbers tend to follow. For the agency, this meant not just faster project completion, but also a 60% reduction in revision cycles, higher client satisfaction scores, and the ability to take on more projects without adding more. But here's the key. They didn't wait until they had perfect metrics to know that they were on the right track. They paid attention to the early signals, just like we noticed in our kitchen when cleanup started feeling less chaotic, even before we consistently finished earlier. The most important change often shows up in unexpected ways. In our kitchen, it wasn't just about getting dinner done faster. It was about how my son started taking pride in his role as the ingredient gatherer, and my wife could relax during cleanup instead of feeling overwhelmed, and how we all found ourselves lingering at the table longer, sharing stories about our day. These weren't metrics we could put on a chart, but they were real measures of our success. Similarly, at the marketing agency, the true signs of improvement weren't just the project timelines. It was the way that the morning meetings changed from stress-filled status updates to collaborative planning sessions. It was how the junior team members started contributing ideas more freely because they understood the whole process. And it was the way that the clients began referring to new business because they trusted the agency's ability to deliver consistently. So how do you measure your workflow improvements? Start by asking 3 simple questions. First, what's not happening anymore? In our kitchen, it was the disappearance of that nightly "whose turn is it" conversation. In the agency, it was the end of the dreaded "we need to restart the design" meetings. The negative patterns often vanish so quietly that you might miss their departure unless you're paying attention. Second, what's happening more easily? For my family, it was getting through cleanup without feeling exhausted. For the agency, it was completing projects without emergency meetings and weekend work. When things that used to feel like a struggle start feeling natural, that's a powerful indicator of progress. And third, this is crucial. What positive changes are you seeing in your environment? For my family, it was beautiful. We were sitting down earlier, having longer conversations over dinner, and everyone was more relaxed during our evening time together. The whole mood of our home changed. Those precious extra minutes of family time, the increased laughter, the deeper conversation, these were real rewards of our improved workflow. When the agency's clients went from asking, "Why is this taking so long?" to "How did you finish that so quickly?" that was a metric that mattered just as much. These improvements create a virtuous cycle. When people see positive changes in their daily experience, they become more invested in maintaining and improving the workflow. In our kitchen, once we saw how much more family time we were getting, everyone became committed to keeping the new system working. At the agency, when team members experienced less stress and more success, they naturally started looking for other ways to improve their processes. Remember, a good workflow measurement isn't about tracking everything, it's about tracking what matters. Just like you don't need a thermometer to know that your kitchen is comfortable, you don't need complex analytics to know that your workflow isn't improving. You just need to pay attention to the right signals. And the best part, when you measure what matters to your team, you create a feedback loop that encourages further improvement. People engage more when they can see and feel the impact of changes, not just read about them in reports. This is why it's so important to celebrate both the quantitative wins, like faster completion times, and the qualitative improvements, like better team morale and stronger relationships. As we wrap up today's discussion, remember that the goal of workflow improvement isn't perfection, it's progress. Whether you're coordinating a family dinner or managing complex business projects, the signs of success are often found in the small moments of "this feels better," just as much as the big metrics of time and money saved. When you're focused on measuring what truly matters to the people involved, you'll find the numbers naturally follow the human success. Throughout our discussion today, we've explored how workflows shape both our personal and professional lives. From my family's evening routine to that marketing agency's transformation, we've seen how the right workflow can change everything. Remember where we started: a chaotic kitchen piled up with dishes and rushed family dinners, A marketing agency struggling with 45-day project timelines and frustrated clients. These weren't just workflow problems. These were missed opportunities for something better. But here's what we learned. The solution isn't always about working harder or adding more resources. Sometimes it's about stepping back and seeing the whole picture. When we gave my son a clear role, gathering ingredients, it wasn't just about making dinner prep more efficient. It created space for more family time. When the marketing agency brought their digital team in earlier, it wasn't just about preventing technical issues. It transformed how they served clients. Let's talk about the key lessons we covered today. First, a workflow is more than just a series of tasks. It's about how people work together to create value. Second, ownership matters. When everyone understands their role and impact, magic happens. Third, improvements don't have to be dramatic to make a difference. Small, thoughtful changes can transform how work flows. And finally, measure what matters to the people doing the work. The best metrics aren't always the ones you can put on a spreadsheet. Here's what I want you to do next. Think about one workflow in your organization that feels more complicated than it needs to be. It might be something you just accepted as the way things are. Take that workflow and ask yourself the question we discussed today. Who really owns it? Where are the handoff points? What small change could be made? What small change could make a big difference? Because here's the truth. Every workflow is an opportunity to serve your clients better, to help your team work more effectively, and to create more value with less friction. Just like in my kitchen, where a few simple changes gave us back our family evenings, the right workflow changes can give your organization the space to focus on what truly matters. Remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Start small, pay attention to what's working, and build from there. Your team, your clients, and your organization will thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Terrance Bryant on behalf of Enovara, and I look forward to hearing how you transform your workflows to serve better your teams, customers, and communities. Thank you, and God bless.